Happy Valentine's Day. We're like three peas in a pod, and we welcome to the special holiday edition of the morning meeting, dispensing with our normal format. Sean, Dan, and I will be telling each other in front of all of you what we mean to each other and showing clips from the past season, highlighting moments of great joy and affection, not only between us, but between us and you, the two-way community. Nah, just kidding. Regular format, I'll run through the day book, and then with peace, love, and understanding, we'll bat things around and then take your questions. If you're here on the two-way platform, raise the electronic hand. That's the yellow one, not the flesh-colored one. And if you're not watching on two-way, if you're on X, say, or YouTube, or Twitch, or Instagram, or
MySpace,
TikTok, MySpace,
Friendster.
anything else, Friendster, anything else, whatever you might be on, if you want to be on the two-way platform and be able to raise that yellow hand and say, Dan, you're so wrong, or Sean, I can't believe you said that, go to two-way.tv and sign up, and then you'll get the special email. Or you can sign up for my Substack, whichever you prefer. Gentlemen, welcome in. Happy Valentine's Day. Dan, you've obviously got something planned because you went to Versailles for Valentine's Day.
That is exactly right. I will be on stage at 9 p.m. No, I'm just joking. Yes, I am meeting my wife later today to kick off Valentine's Day.
Looks fantastic. Sean, what do you got? What do you got in store?
Look, it's exciting that I can present this morning's edition live from here, sponsored by FTD. You can see some of the beautiful options that are available if you just go to themorningmeeting.com/flowers.
Flowers.
Yeah, flowers. You can
What's the discount code? Sean Stems. Sean Stems. Enter Sean Stems for 20% off on checkout.
Oh, how about spicy love?
Yeah, tomorrow you get the Doge special and you get all the old ones.
Yeah, you get the old ones, but they're still good. They're perfectly good. If it's for the government, they're perfectly good. All right, today, Congress is gone. As John McLaughlin used to say, the Republic is safe. They love President's Day apparently because they're taking the whole next week off. So the confirmation process for the remaining nominees is stalled. Interesting story in Politico Day today says Elise Stefanik has job lock because they don't want to give up her vote. So the UN seat will stay vacant for a little bit. President signs executive orders at 1 p.m. in the Oval Office. I have no idea what those are. They say it's closed press, but you flip a coin on that one, probably won't be. Then he heads to Andrews and he flies down to Mar-a-Lago, which he's supposed to arrive at 4:50 p.m. If they keep that closed press and they don't change the schedule, we may not hear from Donald Trump today. Balancing out yesterday when he did three press.
Want to do the over-under on that one?
No, we'll hear. Don't worry. Well, he can always he'll talk on departure and arrival too, because here's my sense of how he thinks. He'll want to talk to the White House press corps on departure. And then when he lands in Florida, it's like, hey, there's a whole different group of people. They need to hear from me. So yeah, he'll talk. J.D. Vance is in at the Munich Security Conference. Marco Rubio had some plane problems yesterday, but I believe is getting there. He's got a bunch of bilateral meetings. The vice president spoke earlier today, and he said, amongst the things he said, were this. Roll tape.
We gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security. And normally, we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values shared with the United States of America.
What he said there echoes his interview he did with the Wall Street Journal, I believe yesterday, published today, in which he said some pretty provocative things about Europe politically, and he also put on the table in some way the potential use of U.S. troops to keep the peace after an agreement between Russia and Ukraine. We'll talk about all that in just a moment. Again, he's meeting with Prime Minister Zelensky, and he has some other bilats at this conference where a lot of members of Congress are as well, including one member of Congress who made a little bit of news. Go ahead and put up number 102. Roger Wicker, Republican senator from Mississippi, in an interview with Politico, said he was puzzled and disturbed by Pete Hegseth's comments regarding Ukraine. He said, quote, "I don't know who wrote the speech. It is the kind of thing Tucker Carlson couldn't have written, and Carlson is a fool." We'll be interested to see what Sean in particular has to say about that in just a moment. Super Bowl parade in Philadelphia today, and preparations continue for Sunday's big Saturday Night Live 3-hour 50th anniversary extravaganza.
I will,
All right, guys.
When I get there, I will give you guys a heads up about some of the cameos that might happen that night.
Yeah. So last night, I was at the Comedy Cellar having dinner above the Comedy Cellar at the restaurant, the Olive Tree, where I did Two-Way Tonight from. By the way, those of you who didn't like the audio, sorry about that. It was meant to be ambiance. Anyway, a bunch of people who are participating in the Saturday Night Live special showed up to practice their gigs, including Steve Martin, Martin Short, and John Mulaney, who just walked on stage, and it was incredible. Anyway.
So you could have seen Paul McCartney yesterday, the other day, and these guys.
Yeah. Well, I didn't see Paul McCartney, but I saw those guys. It was quite something. Anyway, all right. If you want to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. I'm happy to tell you what Steve Martin looks like up close, if that's part on your mind. Ukraine. We've seen now President Trump, Vice President Vance, Secretary of Defense Hegseth, and Marco Rubio all talk about Ukraine, and they've said contradictory things about NATO, about U.S. troops, and clearly there's movement going on. And Donald Trump, of course, talked about meeting with Putin, and he's talked to both of the leaders. Dan, are we verging towards not a deal on the first day, but a quick deal, or is this gonna go off track somehow?
I think we are going towards a deal, but I think what's amazing is just, and I read basically Marco Rubio and JD Vance as close to a like do-over and we made a mistake, or Pete Hegseth made a mistake as you get, because they both basically tried to walk back and say, no, we're not going to take off the table troops. We're not going to take off the table helping to enforce the peace. And for a guy who, likes to say he's master deal maker, art of the deal, what Hegseth said basically gave away almost half the bargaining chips. I mean, it was stunning to a lot of people. It was frankly almost incompetent if you're going to try to be the middleman here. So I think we are getting closer. I think Ukraine wants a deal. Russia wants a deal. Trump wants a deal. So when everyone wants it, you usually get it.
Sean, are the contradictory statements in the walkbacks, are those screw ups, or are those some method to the madness of trying to sort of put everything on the buffet and let people choose which items they want?
I think it's a lack of coordination, if I had to guess, that the president saw some of those comments. I mean, I agree with Dan. President Trump doesn't like to often communicate options. He likes to keep things on the table and say, that I want to be able to negotiate those things. What Pete said for the most, I mean, look, to be honest with you, we all know the dirty secret. Ukraine's not getting into Ukraine. There's going to have to be some kind of cut deal with the land. We get that, but you're not supposed to say it out loud. And and so I think that's the point here. But what it seemed to me, only because JD contradicted him shortly afterwards on the troop stuff, that this was not as coordinated. This is early growing pains.
Yeah.
Well, to call the Wall Street Journal and basically for JD Vance to give an interview to the Journal overnight on top of Senator Wicker's comments. I mean, to me, Trump will never say, we made a mistake or Hegseth made a mistake, but that to me was as close as we need to clean this up fast.
Yeah. That was literally I mean, you can see Trump being like, why did he say that? And then JD being like, I got it.
I generally
Mark, you said yesterday, the lack of criticism or dissent. I mean, I want to just be clear. Wicker's comments are stunning. To say that a Department of Defense secretary that basically said he screwed up and this is. I agree
with you. I agree with you, but I bet he thought he was off the record. That's my spidey sense on that one.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mark, because here's the deal. Number one, to regardless of what you think, the idea that you would go after the sitting SecDef as the chair of the Armed Services Committee is not something that you would do lightly. And two, I got to be honest with you, dragging Tucker Carlson into a debate that he wasn't part of, smart. Smart.
So I'll just tell you, if you're at one of these conferences, and I've never had the pleasure of going to the Munich conference, but I've been at comparable events. If you're at those things and even if you're a media savvy senator, and no disrespect meant to the gentleman from Mississippi, but I wouldn't put him at the top tier of the most media savvy senators, you think you can say stuff to reporters like in the bar or in line for coffee, and it's like just chit chat. And then the reporter says, no, there's no such thing as chit chat. I bet that's what happened. I'm just speculating. On the other thing, I generally, in almost any circumstance, if there's something that seems messed up in the government, I generally go with it was a screw up. It's not some master plan. But what Hegseth said is it's just too basically wrong, right? I mean, it's too big a screw up. So it's not like, to me, it's not like lack of a coordination on an obscure issue. It's just like weirdly counter to, again, as Sean said, what Donald Trump would want. So it's probably just a lack of coordination, but it still strikes me as a lot. I want to read you a line that our friend Michael Granoff, who's watching J.D. Vance in Munich, or maybe he saw this somewhere else, but there's a line from the J.D. Vance speech, which I believe Sean in particular will enjoy quite a bit. All right. This is, if you want a time capsule, a J.D. Vance quote to say, what is his mindset towards woke, the world, America? This is just a classic. If Americans can survive a decade of Greta Thunberg scolding, you, meaning Europe, can survive a few months of Elon Musk. Awesome
That's a good
quote.
one.
Awesome quote.
That's a good one.
All right. Next topic is
By the way, can I just make one random point of like back at the end of the Bush administration, we're going over to do, I think it was I can't remember what the construct was at the time, either G8 or G7 or G20. And one of the national security guys, his name was Dan Price, said at the end of the Bush administration, we're going to go back and there's always a communique at the end where everyone agrees to a bunch of fluffy stuff. And he said, why don't we make this final one of the Bush administration an actual look at all the commitments that we've been making over the last 8 years? Because it's always this fluffy stuff we'll commit to, and then no one ever does it. And he said, why don't we actually reflect on what we actually got done? And everyone in Europe freaked out and was like, you can't do that. And he said, what do you mean? We've been committing stuff for the last 8 years of this administration, and you've done nothing on it. And I love calling these guys on the carpet to some. It's just, JD was absolutely right. They love to talk and to scold us and to talk about, and then they squelch on their commitments. So it was good to see that.
excellent. I like the way you said that, Sean. And I'm not just saying that because it's Valentine's Day. So Mayor Adams and the Justice Department. This is a big story. Some of you say, Mark, you're constantly attacking Trump. And some of you say, Mark, you're not hard enough on Trump. I'm like Chief Justice Roberts. I'm about balls and strikes. Sometimes I compare it to the Biden behavior. Sometimes I just analyze it on its own merits or in the context of the broad sweep of American history. What's happening with the dropping of the charges against Mayor Adams is a huge issue. It's not overreaction to be covering this and to asking hard questions. And it's unprecedented. And people say, oh, there's politics and prosecutorial discretion all the time. There is, but not quite like this. So the New York Times in particular put up the graphic, please. The New York Times, and I'm sorry, I'm not calling for them by number, but I'm having number issues. The New York Times in particular is treating this like Watergate. You can see here the homepage, 4 stories, there's 5 stories. They keep writing stories about it, and they will continue to because they have great sources on this because there's lots of lawyers. There are more people who have quit over this already from the Justice Department and from the Southern District of New York than quit during the Saturday Night Massacre during Watergate. That's not like, totally means it's worse than Watergate, but this is really bad. Mayor Adams is not hiding, at least not entirely. Mayor Adams went with Tom Homan onto Fox and Friends this morning to talk about his partnership with the Trump administration, from the Trump administration's point of view, enabled by this deal to keep him from being prosecuted. For now, roll tape.
Governor Hochul said last night with Rachel Maddow that she would consider removing you. How would you feel about that?
She has her role, I have my role. And throughout this entire ordeal, which I think no American should have to go through, the torment of 15 months that my family and I had to endure for something I didn't do. I didn't do anything wrong. Throughout the entire ordeal, I said one thing: my attorney will handle the legal part. I'm going to handle running the city. We've returned jobs to our city. Our city is getting safer. We're building housing. I think that this is a great American narrative where I stood focused on what I was elected to do.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
you're going to run for re-election?
Yes.
Are you considering running as a Republican?
I'm going to run on the Democratic line. We petitioning to start it, starting soon. Running as a Democrat. There's a many Democrats, like you look at those 78% that believe what we do, what ICE is doing by getting dangerous people out. I think that we have to get people out to vote. That is the problem.
But you're losing by about 25 points to former Governor Cuomo, who wants to be Mayor Cuomo.
Well, listen to this. I had another Andrew in my previous race. He was beating me by double digits in February, but we don't call Andrew Yang mayor. We call Eric Adams mayor. Never give up.
So, Dan, a couple things, or a few things. One, I don't like living in a city with an incompetent and crooked mayor. I said before he took office he'd be worse than Bill de Blasio, and he has been. I read the indictment. I know about some of the other allegations that are pending. And I consider this to be a huge scandal that the Trump administration they put out the confession. They put out the letter from Trump's former lawyer who's at the Justice Department saying we're dropping the charges for political purposes. That's what they said. They came to policy, but it's not. So is this a big deal, or I forget if voters care about it, because they don't. But is this a big deal, and will this cause any political damage to the Trump administration, or they'll just muscle through it?
Oh, it's a huge deal. I mean, the reason they gave for dropping the charges was it would interfere with Adams executing on Trump's focus on immigration. I mean, this is a legal case. And not only were the charges very serious, and the best argument the Adams kind of people in the press were giving is they weren't significant enough, right? No one really is disputing some of the charges. But then it came out that they were getting ready to file more charges, that Adams instructed people to lie. He destroyed evidence. And so to simply say that we're going to drop the charges so that he can help the president, at the same time, they're holding those charges over his head. If Adams goes off the reservation, they could just bring the charges back. I mean, it is unbelievable that if you help the sitting president, you can basically get away with crime as you're on the team. It is just an unbelievable precedent to set.
Dan, I agree with all that. Will they pay a price for this or no?
They will not pay a price for this specifically. But the more that things like this occur, I think it will. I think totality, it will. It'll be the sum of the parts, not this individual part, that could start causing trouble for Trump and Republicans.
Sean, if 0 is David Watkins taking a helicopter to Camp David during the Clinton administration, which you don't even remember happening, and 10 is Watergate, where is this?
1.5 maybe.
1.5. To explain why this is not a huge failure to fairly administer legal justice.
I mean, there's two separate issues here. There's the merits that you're discussing, and then there's the political consequences. Politically, I don't think anyone cares. I think very few people know. So that's why. I mean,
okay. How about the merits of how they're treating the fair administration of justice?
I mean, look, I think that Adams is probably guilty, but I can't say I've read as much as you have, and I don't care as much because I don't live there. So I don't want to pass judgment on it, but the little that I've seen, it seems like he's done some nefarious things.
Okay, let me ask you this. Let's say this was the Biden administration sending a letter to an official saying, we want to drop the we want the U.S. attorney to drop the charges because we want this person to play ball with us. And the U.S. attorney, who was a strong liberal with great credentials, quit. Would you say nothing to see here, or would you say tweet 1,000 times about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's my job. I would, whatever Biden did, I'd say something again. So, let's be honest. I mean,
right, but
I
the
think
point of this, the point of this program is to have honest conversations.
No. And I'm trying to, which is to say, I'm going to be by default less outraged by things that Trump does, and more outraged by the other side. That's just literally how DNA wise, to your point, I'm wired that way. I'll be honest about it. I am less outraged, but do I think that letting people, again, I don't want to speak about a case that I can't say I know well. So
do you even read the letter from the Justice Department to the U.S. attorney? No. All right.
I mean,
Sean's recused from talking about this because he hasn't paid any attention to it. Trust me,
Oh,
if you read
yeah.
it, if you read into it, you'd be outraged. I'm confident
I
you'd
mean,
be
look,
outraged.
just to be clear, because I bet most of the people on Zoom have not read it or followed very closely. The lead prosecutor who resigned clerked for Antonin Scalia and was appointed to her position by Donald Trump. This was not a like Bill Clinton, Barack Obama appointee who, came up through like the liberal machine. This is a tried and true Republican and her colleagues who all resigned saying basically this is outrageous.
Sean
Yeah.
is tweeting about Valentine's Day instead of paying attention.
Oh, I am.
We,
I can
we got some
multitask.
good, and we got some background action with Dan. All right, we're
Yeah,
moving on
I
from
mean-
this one because Sean didn't take it seriously. You will wait till Monday because there are going to be more resignations and more revelations.
But can I just,
And-
you said something about how this was worked. I actually, for what it's worth, just to be clear, from a Trump standpoint, I think they're like, great, go. Like they're not like, oh gosh, there's a consequence of this happening. Like these people, to them, they're just like, great, you want more? Keep going, go.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that. Go to my Twitter feed.
Yeah, I
and
agree with you
see,
too.
You can see a preview of my daily newsletter in which I write about there's 20 things happening right now that would be engulfing any previous president I've ever covered in massive scandal. And rather than caring for Donald Trump, it's like excellent. We're at war with a bunch of lawyers at war, and Eric Adams is being a case study for how we're going to treat people. If you work with us, we won't prosecute you. They're loving it, but that doesn't mean it's right, and it's not.
But I
And
will
it's
go
gonna-
back and say one other thing. I said this before, and I just want to be clear because regardless of the merits of the case, having seen what we've seen in the Justice Department for the last 4 years in particular, actually going back probably 7 now, from a Trump personal standpoint, I think he has personally felt the weaponization of the legal system. And so when somebody is attacked, his default is, yeah, they're probably getting screwed, right? That's number one. Number two is like I said, on our side, having personally been, as the kids say now, adjacent to this, there is a sense of like always now being skeptical of what they're doing. And I get that in the Adams case, there's a little bit more of public evidence. But I'm just saying that these guys have lost a lot of the credibility that they probably enjoyed 7, 8 years ago.
And I will just
I mean,
say,
but just the
two wrongs,
irony
two
of
wrongs
this
do
is
not make a right.
Well, and you're saying that the Justice Department is political. It was a Democratic administration that brought these charges against the head of the largest
Adams-
Democratic city.
But Adams is claiming that he did it because
I
because they weren't playing ball. I will also say that there's so many rich things about my mayor. One of them is he was Mr. Sanctuary City at the beginning of this whole thing. He was meeting busloads of illegal immigrants and from Texas and giving them hugs and kisses and comic books. So this guy, whatever. All right, Sean, House passed a budget resolution, and I know it didn't get a ton of coverage because it's process, and I know it didn't get a ton of coverage because there's a lot of other news. But and the stories today are, well, they did that, but there's lots of trouble ahead. This seems to me to be a massive achievement because they got everybody on record. Even though there's something you don't like in this, maybe a lot you don't like, you got to vote for it, and that's the only way they're going to pass it. So am I wrong? This shouldn't be trouble ahead. This should be they're in rhythm now.
So I'll say the dorky part out loud first. When you said it didn't get a lot of attention, I went there yesterday. Okay, I was the spokesman for the budget committee for 3 years. For one day, everybody cared what we had to do. That was it. One day. I mean, the rest of the year, you could call in sick. It was like being a federal employee. But for one day, everybody came. And the cameras came. There was a line down the hall. So I walk into Cannon, go to the second floor. There's 2 cops outside. I'm like, oh, look, I can probably get in. But and I'm kind of wondering. I'm like, hey, can I just walk in? The guy's looking at me. What do you mean? Can you just walk in? And I'm thinking to myself, old school budget committee days. There's probably a line, and I'll have to get a number. I put it up on my Instagram if you want to see on the story. You could have camped out there. There was like 5 people there, not just I mean, it was kind of embarrassing that for as much attention as it should have gotten, nothing. There weren't people there. There weren't press there. There weren't members there. Now, granted, it's an all-day affair, but I've been there for 3 years. This was the kind of thing where people cycled out.
Amazing.
So that's number one. Number two, to your point, I will give Speaker Johnson and the team a lot of credit for this. They ironed out all of these things. I was sitting there watching Chip Roy speak very eloquently about his support of the budget and the inclusion of these certain amendments. So this is it. If they got all Republicans on board yesterday, this resolution as it stands gets through the House. As I said, and I stand by this, when it goes to conference in whatever form that publicly takes, that will be the bigger problem for them, because that's when the Senate's going to come into, like, that's when you lose all the stuff that you got. Or you have to compromise on it. But this is going to pass. I think Johnson did a great job keeping his members. As you mentioned with Elise Stefanik, they're holding her back because they need to give to ensure they don't lose one more vote. So I think they get the resolution through. But then when it becomes to, in order to make it a concurrent resolution, they're going to have to do something with the Senate.
Yeah. Dan, does this passage offer hope to Speaker Johnson and those who favor one big, beautiful bill, that the Senate backs down, or is the Senate going to proceed and create this ridiculous situation of two simultaneous incompatible strategies?
I think the Senate's going to proceed. And I think the thing to watch in the House is that the reconciliation instructions have 4.5 trillion in tax cuts. What Donald Trump wants and the Senate wants is closer to 7. There is a huge delta between the two. And Jason Smith and the House guys are saying, we cannot afford more of these. And that is where, like, it is hanging out there. That fork in the road is still looming. And that is where the Democrats come. Look, for Trump, who wants cuts on taxes on tips and Social Security benefits and all these things that he promised during the campaign, and renew his tax cuts. And the big reason the House won't do it, that Freedom Caucus crowd wants more cuts. 3 trillion, 4 trillion. Where would it come from? Healthcare, Social Security. So they basically kick the can down the road. They're getting something done, but they're no closer to an agreement on the real meat of the issue.
This gets back, actually, I will double down on this now. This is why it's going to come to a head, but even more so because for the most part, Donald Trump's gotten away with, like, hey, look, I don't care 1 or 2 because I don't want to get in the weeds. And frankly, I think that's smart. But here's where it's going to become a problem. When it goes to conference, and it will, the Senate's going to say, hey, this is what we passed. The House is going to say, this is what we passed. And now we actually need to make a decision, because how big are those reconciliation instructions? And you can't get away with, I don't care which way you go, because those meet in conference.
Correct. All right. Again, if you want to get in on the conversation in just a moment, please raise your electronic hand. As always, please extend the presumption of grace to Sean, Dan, and myself, particularly because it's Valentine's Day. And remember, as Elvis Costello and Nick Lowe both have said, peace, love, and understanding. All right, Sean, winner of the week.
My winner of the week, I wrote this down, taxpayers.
Excellent. Dan.
All right, I'm going to go a little off the board on the Democratic side. Josh Shapiro. He filed a lawsuit. The Democratic left, it got way more press than I thought it would. People are all like, no, if you look on the left, people are like, oh my God, he's starting to step forward. Just what it's worth.
Winner of the week, Elon Musk. Didn't have a perfect week.
That's why I said taxpayers.
But that Oval Office thing really helped him a lot with a lot of different people, not just because his son is adorbs, but because he spoke out and he framed it as, do we live in a democracy or do we live in a bureaucracy? Dan, loser of the week.
Congressional Democrats. Because Elon Musk had it. The press conference was great and Doge continues.
Sean, loser of the week.
Tie for the federal bureaucracy and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York.
Why is that?
Oh, DSCC chair.
She is the chair of the DSCC, the Democratic Senatorial Congressional Committee. And Minnesota Senator Tina Smith announced she's not running for re-election. Otherwise, would have probably been pretty safe. That puts it in play, at least forces them to spend a ton of money. And number 2, Gary Peters of Michigan also said he wouldn't run again. Another seat that puts at least the Democrats in deep financially. So, and Gillibrand, obviously Chuck Schumer technically runs the D-Trip, but she's the name on the letterhead.
Yeah. The
Well,
loser of
keep
the week.
an eye on Gene Shaheen. There are a lot of
Yeah.
rumors Gene Shaheen
Oh, dude,
is not
if,
going to run.
if Gene Shaheen doesn't run, by the way, at some point, that's when you just say, all right, we'll just let them keep the majority for 2 more years. And then we're going to, I mean, that's what in sports they call a rebuilding year.
If she doesn't run, I've got 2 words for you. Brace yourselves. Grab onto the arms of your chair. 2 words. Senator Lewandowski.
Senator, wait, how old should she be?
Ooh, I'm sitting at a bar. I may have to have a drink
Caroline's
with that one.
27. She can't be a senator yet, right? So it's 30 on the Senate.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I wonder if
Ooh, a
Maggie,
family.
the other Maggie would run. Have we ever had a state with 2 senators named Maggie at the same time?
I'm going to go with definitely no.
Let me ask you this.
Have we had a state where they have 2 same first names? Let's just go
Yes.
broader.
Good. Probably
Yeah.
John.
Definitely John.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. I was thinking about this the other day. How often in American history has a state had 2 non-white senators at the same time? How often do you think that's happened?
I wonder about Reconstruction during
Let's
that
go with them.
era.
Dad, don't count Reconstruction.
Never.
That's all screwed up.
Never.
Well, not never. California, at the end of the Biden administration, had 2 non-white senators.
Oh, non-white.
Non-white.
Yeah. I'm
Non-white.
sorry.
But there's another state now that does, and this is what made me think of it. What's the state now that has
Does-
2 non-white senators? Oh, New Jersey has 2 non-white senators.
Booker and
But
Kim.
Ooh.
yeah, so those are 2, but I don't think
I don't know
there's
that Democrats consider Asians a protected class.
Well, Hawaii, I exempt Hawaii because Hawaii often has 2 non-white senators, I think.
Good call.
But if you exempt Hawaii, so just do continental U.S. Again, how often has this happened in history? Can anybody put in the chat if you can name any other time it's happened? Because I don't think it has, because we just haven't had that many non-white senators.
all right,
Not counting.
Patricia is saying 4 times.
All right, what are the other 2?
Patricia, if you and then
Not counting Reconstruction, not
Right.
counting Hawaii. Exempt those 2.
all right,
Has it ever happened in American history except the 2 I'm saying, which are both in the last few months? All right, Dan, what are you
I was
watching
thinking
for this
like New-
weekend?
Oh,
New Mexico? New Mexico's got a bunch
I
of
was
white
just
senators.
wondering. Yeah, for now. I'm just continuing to watch what does Donald Trump do. I mean, there's so many things. I feel like there's never a day off. There's always some new twist. So I'm just watching Mar-a-Lago. How does that sound?
Okay, Sean, what are you watching?
I was going with Dan, but now I'm just going. I'm going to be in Idaho giving a speech Saturday night, so I'm watching the weather.
Yes, you could be stuck in
I was
Idaho.
going with Dan's. I was going with Mar-a-Lago.
You're private Idaho. I'm back to SNL, 3 hours Sunday night. Block it. It's going to be incredible. Steve Martin's practiced his monologue last night. It's phenomenal. It's great. So I recommend that to you. He's doing doing the main monologue, which is appropriate and quite an honor. And the other stuff's really good too, but it's being workshopped. Maybe they'll practice again. I might have to go back down tonight in case they show up again.
That's awesome.
But the Steve Martin monologue was excellent. All right.
How did Mark, when people like that, if you walked in expecting to see like the Dan and Sean show and Steve Martin goes, well, how did the audience perceive that?
I have to tell you, and the people I was with, we ran down from the restaurant down to the club when we got word that we saw them walk in, like they just walked into the restaurant, and it was clear. We
That's
figured out
awesome.
what they were doing. So we ran down. It's a younger crowd. They're not like old like me. So for them, Steve Martin, whatever. And again, the people I was with disagreed with me. I thought it was tepid. I thought they applauded, but I would have done it. I'd standing ovation. Like Steve Martin walks in unexpectedly. They reacted. They were into it, but not like me. I wanted people to faint, and there was no fainting.
Did you ask
But
to
it-
sign your chest or something? Do you have a Sharpie?
No, I didn't do anything. I did take a picture of them when they were posing for somebody else's picture. But yeah, like if
That's
Chappelle had
selfie-worthy.
been there, they were super psyched to see Chris Rock.
Oh,
I
he's
love
good.
Borghese. Borghese's amazing. He can do no wrong in
By
my
the way,
eyes.
I got turned on to him 6-8 months ago when his Netflix.
He's incredible.
That guy
He's
is the
incredible.
funniest guy I've ever heard.
He is incredible. He does
Susan,
no wrong.
Susan, who is your favorite comedian, Susan?
Mine?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't
Do
know.
you have one?
I do love comedy, but I wouldn't say I have
Yeah.
a favorite. I don't know.
Yeah. Who played Garth in Wayne's World?
Dana Carvey.
Dana
I don't
Carvey.
know.
Yeah. All right. Welcome in, Garth.
Thanks.
Thank you
More
for joining.
importantly, he played George
I did
W.
a lot of those jokes.
welcome in. Thank you for joining. Let us know where you are, who people don't know, and tell us what's on your mind.
Yep, I'm in upstate New York, and I'm so happy for this platform. You guys make my day.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
very nice. I know I pronounced the guy's name wrong, by the way. Thank you for pointing it out. Susan, floor is yours.
Thanks. I just have a quick question. With all the executive orders that are coming out of the White House, I just want your opinion. I don't understand really how they work beyond once they're signed. How long are they going to be in effect? Do they just stay in effect while Trump is in office? Do they get reversed if someone else comes in after him? Do they ever get signed into law by the lawmakers? How does that work? Because of course there's a lot happening in the executive.
Great question. Dan, Schoolhouse Rock this one.
Well, Sean, do you want to? I saw you were putting fingers up and
So
stuff. Do you want to?
an executive order stands until it's undone. It is not a law.
Right.
It's within it's telling the executive branch, do X, do Y. It's like a company policy. So you get a new boss and they say, from now on, we have casual Friday. The next time a boss comes in, they can say casual Friday's gone. It's not, it's as long until somebody else says it's not. There's no force of law. It's directing an agency or some other aspect of the executive branch to do something or not to do something. But what normally happens, Biden comes in, he undoes everything that Trump does. Trump then undoes Biden's. So half of your executive orders are undoing the last person's and then doing new things as well. But they have no force of law.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's the key is that, if you really want to effectuate change, you need to put it into legislation. You really need to codify it. And that's why you keep getting these, they're traditionally until now, there was like 15 or 20 executive orders that when the other party got in control, they automatically undid the previous. Like the Mexico policy would be one of the most common that people know about in terms of supporting abortion overseas with federal money. Every Republican would eliminate it, and every Democrat would reauthorize it. So we'll just have to see, because he is a flurry of action. And I think for Democrats, this is one of the things where these executive orders are somewhat window dressing. It is a statement of values. It is a statement of what you want to see, but you're not really bending the curve of history or really making fundamental change. And that's why I think one of the things to always kind of think about with Trump is what is real and what is kind of more the great, television production of the images and the things he wants you to see, to think about and associate with him.
Susan, thank you for coming in. Great question. We appreciate you being part of Two Way.
Thanks, guys. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thanks.
Same to you.
And to you. And to you. Greg, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks what's on your hat, where you are, and what's on your mind, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'm here in Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa, snowy Iowa, and that's the local school my son teaches at, Christian school.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, I love Two Way. Been watching since July. So
I love Des Moines. Where do you live in Des Moines?
Northwest side.
Northwest
side. Yeah.
Is Tamaya's still there, or did it close?
No, Tamayan and Sons still there.
Yeah.
It's got a great Italian hoagie.
Yeah, I miss it. All right, sorry. I got like Homer Simpson. I was like, hoagie. Sorry. Go ahead.
Please don't take away our caucuses. Please don't.
Yeah. No, I love the caucuses because it allows me to talk to Iowans and go to Tamaya's and
So
Sons. Greg, what's on your mind, sir?
I just think of this whole DOJ and everything, government approach. Maybe my wife and I are shopping for a house, and this is not ingenious or unique to me, but if you're looking at a house, seems like there's two approaches with the government here. One side's looking at this house going, it's falling apart. It's like a hoarder's living in here. We need to go in and just gut this thing and remodel it from the studs up. And the other side's going, oh, don't touch that. Don't touch that. Don't touch that. It just needs a little touch up. And that's the difference in approach, it seems to me, and the public, of course, will be the ones who decide which way things go. So I just wonder what you think about that. And the Democrats, Dan, you keep saying, and I understand what you're saying, that people are okay with it until it touches them, right? So, Wisconsin farmers or Medicare or so on. But do you think that people's perspective of government as a whole is it needs to be totally gutted and rebuilt, or it's pretty good, just needs a little touch up?
Greg, great question. And I think for those who haven't seen it, because I tweeted it right before we came on, Axios did a focus group of voters from Arizona who voted for Biden in 20 and Trump in 24. And they were unanimous in their support of Doge and said, keep going. I think, and I've said this politically, I think people are very supportive of what Elon Musk is doing. And every time he puts an example up, he's not dumb. Trump is not dumb, obviously. They are examples for which the average person says it's common sense to get rid of that. I think, to use your analogy, of a house, if you gut the house, you tend to move out of the house, right? It is no longer operational. What they're the challenge with a renovation, when the house has to keep functioning, you're living in it, it has to keep providing, the roof and the kitchen has to keep working, so to speak, is how do you do this? And I think that is the question. Is it scalpel, or is it just a, sledgehammer? And if it's a sledgehammer and things fall through the cracks and you start saying, wait a second, that service, that function that I have relied on and didn't even really associate with government, I just took it for granted, is harming my life, then people will get upset. But I think right now, frankly, a lot of this is kind of very, very small stuff, but nevertheless, small is better than nothing. So, they're going to keep being supported. I'm sure if a poll comes out, 80% will support, what they're doing for now.
Greg, when Reince previous got elected chairman of the RNC, I went to go work for him, and we were $25+ million in debt. And we literally looked through the budget, and we had like legacy newspapers, the Washington Post, the New York Times, not to mention, okay. And we just started saying this, we can do this better and cheap. I mean, some of the stuff you could actually obviously now get online. We went through the budget literally line by line and cut out stuff. And the idea was, and even when we traveled, Reince used to play a game with a guy named Ron Weiser on like who could travel to wherever cheaper than the other guy. Like, I got 5 airline miles, we got a free breakfast at the Hilton, and we ate dinner by, and there was a respect for donors' money. The idea was, you're giving us money, we want to show you that we're using it to advance the party, whatever. And I think obviously that's the political version of this, but I look at it the same way, to your point about the government. Taxes, I get it. I love this country. I'm willing to pay for it and all of the things that we enjoy. I've been blessed, so I want to help. Like, there's certain aspects of living in a country like this that we have to pay for, and that's part of it. But I don't want to be disrespected. I don't want that money thrown away, and I don't care if it's $20 or $20 million. And so the effort that the DOJ team is leading, to me, is such a breath of fresh air. And I get that might not solve our deficit, but it's a mentality. And the mentality is, it's like when I hire an intern, if you can't do the small things well, why would I ever trust you with the big things? And so making the copies, getting them on time, putting them in the right place, making sure there aren't smudges, shows that a level of detail and professionalism. And these guys going through the budget and the government in that same way, kind of to your description, shows that they care. And I think for a lot of people, maybe this won't, it's not going to solve that or the deficit, but it's a good start and a good mentality and a breath of fresh air that we welcome, I think. And to me, the best part about this, it's not partisan. Being smart, being pragmatic, common sense isn't a Republican or Democratic thing. It just shows common sense.
Greg, thank you for joining.
Point,
great question. Thank you.
Every
Sorry,
company, and I was going to say, to Sean's point, every family has had to do this at some point, because everyone experiences good times and not good times. And every company or nonprofit has to do this. Go through your budget and make some tough choices. And I think a lot of people think the federal government has never really had to do that in years.
Deborah, welcome in. Thank you for joining. I want to know, I want you to tell folks
Deborah,
where you are. And the scarf is right out of Sergeant Pepper. I love it. So thank you for
I'm in New
bringing
York
that
City.
to us.
I'm not going to sing like you wanted me to do last time. I'm coming to share mostly a sentiment, also maybe a question for Sean. I was listening to some international news this morning and also watching on X with what's happening in terms of Trump moving to more of a transactional way of dealing with former allies, and watching the Europeans really get freaked out about it. I'm also afraid people in the comments are going to say I'm being a neocon. I don't think I am. I saw some polls last night that were asking European countries, would you turn more to China now? Now, I'd say less than half of them said they would, but I'm curious. I guess I'm watching the shift to a multipolar world. I notice I'm still a little hung up on a unipolar one. However, I do see why we would want European countries to be handling more of their own defense, actually make them be self-sufficient. So I'm definitely behind that. I also see us being the policemen of everything all the time, both in terms of military and enforcing values on everybody, doesn't really work. But I am nervous about kind of ceding to like Russia and China, like what if they just want to grab this or that? And I just wonder, Sean, even with you, like I feel nervous in a world where we don't have a little more, I don't know, a little more dominance. And so I'm struggling with this because I don't know. Do you feel comfortable with a multipolar world?
Yeah. Deborah, thank you. I'll say what I often say. You speak for tens
Great
of
question.
millions. Sean.
Can I just ask, just real quick, Deborah, how do you define multipolar world?
Well, if it's as opposed to maybe the U.S. just sort of being the dominating figure over everything, having, say China, let China kind of do maybe what they want to do, let Russia, we're not really doing anything to undermine them particularly, except maybe economic. I see we're willing to undermine people economically, but now there's a little more like, if they do this, maybe we're going to be okay with it, to be seen.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think one, let's face reality. It's a two-power world. It's the United States and China. Russia has nukes, North Korea has nukes, but they're not economic powerhouses that we fear or worry about. So militarily, even, I would argue that it's just us and China. The answer I would give you, though, is that I think, and this is what President Trump articulates, is that for too long we've been taken advantage of. The Article 5 agreement with NATO in particular, not necessarily Europe writ large, but NATO, which it was that, hey, we'll make a deal with you. If you guys put 2% towards your national defense, we'll all join arms and attack against one. And then they said, okay, well, that's cool. The US will always have our back. So like, instead of us spending our money on our national defense, we'll spend it on other priorities for our own country, our own people. We got taken advantage of for years and decades. And our own, as I was saying to Mark a while ago, after the end of the Bush administration, when we looked back, they love to talk tough. They love to tell us what we should do with our money. We're $36 trillion in debt because we look out for everybody else. We're like that kid who keeps coming home to the parents and saying, I just need another loan. And the parents take out a mortgage and then the kid goes and squanders it. Europe has taken advantage of us. They've got money. They can do stuff. And we're only asking them, frankly, to keep up with obligations that they made to all of us collectively. Same thing with Canada, frankly. So I think there's a big difference. We're not turning a blind eye on people who can't pay their bills. They're choosing not to and spending it on themselves while we go into debt and mortgage that debt on our grandchildren's grandchildren, because that's how bad it is now. And we have real existential threats, as I said, with respect to China, because they're not kidding around. So we can either continue to subsidize everyone else at our own peril, or we can focus on us and make sure that we do have the strength and fortitude to take on the challenge that China will pose to us within 24 months.
Yeah, I just think there's a tone to it potentially. It's like I totally agree with this. Like, let's actually make them be strong. Macron apparently was sort of embracing it. I was hearing it. It was sort of like, great, let's build up our own.
By the way, I would say this,
military.
The European press, and this is not like, they are some of the most arrogant, elitist. As much as I hate most of the U.S. press, the European press puts them to shame.
Okay.
Yeah, Deborah, thanks for coming. Hold on one second, because we want to go to John Thune. Deborah, thanks for coming in. I think I owe you an email, and I'm sorry, Mike. Thanks to the success of 2A, I'm getting hundreds a day. So stand by, and thank you for joining.
I think we should go to Chevy Chase.
Let's listen to John Thune a little.
And do it right. And obviously they're going to identify some things that, perhaps can't be changed or fixed, but there's a ton of stuff out there, I think.
It's super
that
popular.
Can be done better. Yeah. Well, and think about it. I mean, the inefficiency in our federal government that's baked in and built in literally over decades.
I'm sure you probably ran on the issue when you first ran for.
I did. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Everybody does.
The other thing is that President Trump is going to get his cabinet.
Right.
And one of the reasons he's going to
all right, we can dump out of this.
We were able to shepherd that through.
Dan, do you want to comment on Deborah or John Thune or anything before we move on?
Yeah, just quickly with Deborah, because I agree with Sean. Politically, I think the country is completely where Sean is, or the majority of the country. The thing that I always keep coming back to with this is the Godfather adage, right? In the opening scene of The Godfather, He puts his arm around the guy and he says, look, someday I may call on you to do a favor. That day may never come, but when it does, you're going to do, a service for the Don, right? The reason that we do things for people is there will come days when we need help, where we need favors, either economically, militarily. After 9/11, the number of countries that joined us in Afghanistan who lost soldiers on the battlefield, to everyone's benefit, but really primarily on our behalf. The more that you govern or you operate or negotiate with threats, and like we are the alpha and you are like the weakling, someday it's going to bite us in the butt.
Yeah. All right. There's a bunch of people I want to get to, so I'm going to ask everybody, people we bring in, and Sean and Dan and me, everybody be kind of brief because I want to get a bunch of people in. We already talked to Iowa. Let's talk to our New Hampshire correspondent. It's like a presidential year. Michael Graham covers politics in New Hampshire, and he's going to tell us what the state of Jeanne Shaheen's reelect, and if she doesn't run, who wins. Michael.
That's a great shirt, Michael.
Thank you.
I
Thank you very
like
much.
that.
First, I spent my misspent youth as a stand-up comic out on the tour, and I was a little MC, just started working. I'm at the Punchline in Atlanta, and who walks in? Robin Williams, one of my comedy heroes. It was just an amazing experience. So what's fascinating is there's a ton of stories in the cycle, Halperin, about the Senate trying to figure out who's going to run in 26, and Shaheen is in all of them. Most of it unflattering
because she's raised no money.
Yeah, exactly. She's right. Not only that, but our news outlet went back and looked. The previous two cycles, by this point in the cycle, she had announced that she was running again. She has pointedly not announced. In fact, there are 5 swing districts, Senate seats. People kind of agree there are 5 swings. She's the only one of the 5 who hasn't announced. And
she's of an age. She's of an age, and her grandkids are of an age where you can easily imagine her saying, "I don't want to do this for 6 more years."
But did you see the Notice? I think that's the name of the outlet piece this morning, where they recapped the concerns that Schumer has. And they asked her about, are you going to run? And is your age an issue? Should you be the person representing? And she says, who else? Name 3 other people who could do it. Which is, by the way, the kind of answer you get from 78-year-old ladies. It's not the kind of answer you get from people who are thinking about the politics. In fact, they had to send a follow-up note of, I want to serve the people. So she's getting cranky.
I will say this, Michael. It's amazing that level of arrogance pervades so many people at that level where they're like, no one could replace me.
Exactly.
Right. All right, Michael, thank you. Unless you got something else you want to say.
Well, no, about Shapiro, we own a property down in the Philly suburbs, and talked to one of the Senate leaders on the Republican side in the state Senate. And she had fascinating conversations about what it's like to work with Josh Shapiro. And she's very dubious about how he's going to play at the national level. He does not play well. She also pointed out he more than doubled the staff when he took office, quote, half of which are used to post pictures of him on Facebook and Twitter. So I thought that was
well, then he'll fit right in with Donald Trump, who posts everything on Facebook and Twitter all the time.
Thank you, Michael, and to True Social. Thank you, Michael. Always great to hear from you. All right. What better Valentine's gift to give the entire two-way community than to reunite 2 of our longest serving community members, 2 of our fan favorites, Chris Simmons and Courtney Martin. Welcome to you both. You 2 have been on together previously, I believe, right?
Yes.
Good morning.
Yeah. Why don't you 2 just talk for 3 minutes amongst yourselves and we'll listen.
Well, Chris, I have thought so much about you because there was a time period I wasn't on, and when I've been back on, I haven't seen you, so I've been wondering how you were.
Yeah, on as much, but I'm on from time to time. Sometimes a little quieter.
Yeah. How are you doing?
How are you, Chris?
I'm doing great. But here's what I want to talk about, and we can talk about it perhaps.
You and Courtney chat. Well, listen.
Okay.
I think that people are overstating the general support for DOJ. I do think the vast majority of people are okay with somebody going in and rooting out inefficiency. But the way it's being done with a lot of gross mischaracterizations of what's being found, lies about 59 million for condoms. There was not 59 million for condoms. So this is the Trump administration thing where they make up the big thing, the big shiny object. It's politically focused too, because they're finding stuff that goes to root out what is considered woke. But I want to know when they're going to go find the subsidies for the Republican farmers in the Midwest and all the stuff that's going to non-woke companies that are benefiting from the graft in DOD. So I think there's a political edge to it. There's mischaracterizations. There's overstatement about how much money is really being found. And it's not getting anywhere near close to finding that $2 trillion. But it's nice, shiny objects for his base. And that's the game that's being played. So yes, I agree. And I also think that Obama actually should have done this when he first got elected. When folk thought he was going to go drain the swamp, then he went in there and acted like an entitled elite instead of acting like a true change agent, which he claimed he would be. And rural folk got tired of waiting for the Harvard guy to do something they thought they needed to be done for themselves. And when he didn't do it, they said, well, hell, maybe Trump will do it for me. So
Amen. Amen.
So a lot of this is Jim's fault. But Doge is not what most people really want the way it's being handled.
Ms. Martin, do you agree with that?
Oh,
The spirit of Valentine's Day?
I totally disagree, but I literally had the same conversation with my 83-year-old father and stepmother yesterday. I went to lunch, and it has been stressful in our family, my extended family, because they have all been so upset about the election. And so I just thought, I'd take my dad to lunch and just, he worked for Social Security Administration. And I'm like, Dad, is there one thing?
Is Courtney cutting off for everybody or just for me?
Just for you, I think.
Oh, I just said, Dad, is there? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
I said, Dad, is there just one thing that you think's positive that Trump or Vance has done? No. Just he will not budge. He can't stand Elon Musk. He thinks he's in it just to make more billions for himself. And it's like hitting my head up against a brick wall. I'm not going to get to him. But
yeah,
well,
maybe Chris can talk to him.
Oh, I would love for him to. But may I real quickly say, I just wanted to give a couple winners and losers of the week, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I think the winners of the week are the MAGA moms,
That's
American
a good
children.
Good call. You should have said that.
Children.
Yes, good call.
RFK Jr. and Trump. And the losers are the week are the singing Democrats. Which side are you on?
Yo,
side
that was
are
so
you
good.
on?
So good. So good.
Courtney, you put us all to shame. Your answers are way better than ours. So thank you for
side are you
preempting.
on? And then
All right.
They're losers.
Chris, you want to join in and singing? Do you know that song? No.
Okay.
Chris doesn't want to sing that one.
Another loser. It's McConnell, two more. Caroline
Yeah.
Kennedy and her son, John Schlossberg.
Yeah.
No,
Courtney, this is why
Courtney, well
the algorithm and the AI analysis of the two-way chat since our inception, the most commonly written expression of thought is Courtney should have her own show on two-way.
Oh my gosh. I want to do
that's number one.
I want to do the people correspondence, the behind the scenes.
Yeah. All right.
By the way, did you guys
both.
coordinate that Chris is in blue and Courtney's in red? That was perfect.
No, but it works out for the screen
Chris,
the screen grab.
I have missed Chris. Happy Valentine's Day, y'all.
All right, thank you both. We got to go because we got to end a little bit early because one of us has something to do. I won't say who, Sean. So real quick, next week, some special programming to tell you about. On Monday, Sean and Dan will be hosting the show, just the two of them, at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, normal time. At 10 a.m. Eastern Time, I will be guest hosting for Michael Smerconish, and amongst my guests in the 10 a.m. hour will be Sean and Dan. So watch the morning meeting with Sean and Dan at 9 a.m. and then flip over to SiriusXM, where the three of us will basically do this on a different platform. Then on Wednesday, the debut of Meghan McCain's show, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, you'll be able to watch that the normal way. You'll get all the normal notifications, so you know how to watch Meghan's show. And then that night at 6 o'clock after Meghan's show, a special live focus group with young people 18 to 30 talking about what they think of Elon Musk. And we've done pre-interviews with them. It's fascinating. So join for that. And by the way, tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, I will close out your week with a classic edition of Two Way Tonight. Gentlemen, happy Valentine's Day.
6 o'clock tonight.
Same
Victor,
to you guys.
That does not disappoint.
Yeah, and big on Valentine's Day too.
Yeah, nothing says I love you.
Thank you everybody for watching. As always, particularly grateful to those who raised their hand to ask questions. Enjoy your day. The surprise Trump press conference or press conferences will be summarized at 6 p.m. And again, see you Monday morning. Sean and Dan solo duo, and then
We got a little special surprise coming your way.
all right. I will know because I'll be
duet.
hosting some Merconish at night. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.